How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Hello, America. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, happy to have you with me. We got a busy day of news ahead of us, but I'm going to start where I wish to start. I want to talk to you about rhetoric, because the left tells us that words matter, and words apparently do matter. And I mean, it's no secret that people can say things and get others riled up. And the media, of course, is obsessed with Donald Trump's rhetoric. Rhetoric, they say, incites violence. What about the left's rhetoric? No one's going to come out and admit this. But I do wonder to what extent there are those at the upper echelon thought leadership categories of the left hoping Donald Trump eats a bullet. Because listen to the rhetoric. Look, this is not wild speculation on my part. I don't think they hate the man that much. And if they believe that Donald Trump's rhetoric can lead people to violence, what about their own rhetoric? They say he's an authoritarian. They say he's a dictator. And it's kind of wild, the dichotomy between he's going to impose a Christian nationalist theocracy versus he's going to be a dictator. Which is it? It's the end of democracy. Are we headed to theocracy? Are we headed to autocracy? What exactly is it? They don't know. They're just convinced it's the end of democracy. And if you believe that Donald Trump is an existential threat who will end democracy in America, and he's ahead in the polling in all of the swing states and thus the Electoral College, can you really take the chance? Are they waiting for the crazy person with the courage of his crazy convictions? I actually, this is something I am more and more concerned about. When you are insistent that Donald Trump is a uniquely dangerous politician, as are his supporters, and as a uniquely dangerous candidate, as are his supporters, who, if he takes office in a Democratic election, it will be the last election that we have. He will be the second coming of Vladimir Putin or Hitler. Don't you need to do something to save the republic? I will say again, as I have said, I am convinced that in 2020, there were shenanigans, but it was a lawful, legal election. A lot of the people who tell me the election is stolen, they point to things that have been thoroughly debunked. They just refuse to accept that they've been debunked. The 2,000 mules thing, those people are being sued. They never even handed over their evidence in the state of Georgia, and now in a lawsuit there because they claim to have documentation of things they said, and now they refuse and say, actually, we didn't have any of that stuff. A lot of people got played and can never admit they got played. A lot of people who've been conned are never going to admit they've been conned. But there are so many people who are convinced 2020 was stolen on the right and that in 2024 it's going to be stolen again. I suspect you're going to have a lot of people arrested in 2024 on the right who actually try to steal the election because they think, well, those people on the left are trying to steal it. We're going to steal it back. But I also think you're going to have people on the left arrested in 2024 because they're so convinced that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. If they hadn't shot him by then, they're going to do whatever they can to stop him from taking the election, including actually trying to steal it. I think both sides are going to engage in legal shenanigans in 2024 that undermine the election. I think both sides are going to do it because I don't think anyone really did in 2020 to the extent that it mattered. There are shenanigans in every election, just not enough to matter. I think in 2024, both sides are going to try because they're so convinced the other side is going to try that they're going to try in their minds to save an election from the other side. But I also do really worry about Trump because the people on the left are convinced he's going to become a dictator. Now, as I have said, Donald Trump is not, because the left, you have to understand the thing about the left is that they do not trust the American people. They only trust themselves. Remember, if Donald Trump gets elected, the Russians will be blamed, but you too will be blamed. You will be blamed for betraying the American public. This is the entire rhetoric of Democrats right now is democracy's on the ballot. If you vote for Donald Trump, you're voting against American democracy, so you're to blame. They'll blame you. But I'm deeply concerned that the left says words matter, and their words are more and more designed to incite violence from the left against Trump and his supporters in the name of saving the republic. And what it all comes down to is they don't actually trust the system. The left doesn't trust the Constitution. They've manipulated it for so long with the nonsense of a living, breathing document. They don't really trust the Constitution. They don't trust the foundations of the republic. They think the country is weak and only they are strong. They think that they must have power to save us from ourselves. It is, ironically, the autocratic thinking of every secular tyrant on the planet. The Nazis, the communists, all of them, the socialists, that they all believe that they must save the people and their nation from themselves, and they in power are the only righteous ones. It's part of their secular religion. And yes, I lump the Nazis, the National Socialists, in there with the communists as something of the left because they were all kissing cousins. The Nazis and the communists had a whole lot in common. They were cousins, kindred spirits within the ideological parameters of socialism. It's left-wing revisionist history to claim that the Nazis were some sort of right-wing authoritarians. They were very much not of the right. But the left in charge of the academy gets to rewrite things to their convenience. And then, of course, they do this as well because they actually want to minimize how evil communism is because so many of them are communists. But the communists and the Nazis were kissing cousins. But whether you agree with that analysis or not, the Nazis, the communists, secularists, the Nazis were not Christians. In fact, they killed a lot of Christians in addition to Jews. Way more Jews than anybody, but they killed a lot of Christians. They believed in some sort of pagan Arianism. And the left is convinced Donald Trump's the second coming of Adolf Hitler. That this is the Weimar Republic, that we're a weak republic. They are strong. We are weak and they are strong. Yes, secularists love us. And they want to save us from ourselves. I'm really concerned about that. We get lectured all the time from the media about Donald Trump's rhetoric. We never get lectured about the left's rhetoric. And as I pointed out yesterday, the last two mass assassination attempts in this country politically came from people who watched MSNBC, not from people who watched Fox News. And the craziness on MSNBC right now about Donald Trump is through the charts. I mean, they literally are saying on MSNBC that democracy is on the ballot. The choice this November is between democracy and dictatorship. They really do believe that. That's dangerous, dangerous rhetoric. And if it was Republicans saying about Democrats, people in the media would be saying they're trying to get somebody killed. So are the Democrats trying to get Donald Trump killed? Yes, I actually think some of them are. I actually do believe that there are a lot of progressive pundits who will never be brave enough to admit it, but they would be perfectly happy if someone got Donald Trump and took him out because they have come to believe he's an existential threat to the republic and he needs to be stopped. And they have no faith in the American people to stop him, particularly when he's ahead in the polling in every swing state. So they want externalities to take advantage of it. It's why they work so hard to throw him in prison. They wanted him in jail before the election. Well, that's not panning out. They're going to have to do something else to stop him. It's dangerous, dangerous thinking and rhetoric. The reality is that if Donald Trump gets elected president, he will serve 4 years. Why? Because the Constitution says you can only serve 2 total terms as president of the United States, a maximum of 8 years, unless you become president as vice president after 2 years of someone else's term. Then you get to finish off the 2 years of that term, and then you get your 8 years for a total of 10, and that's it. You can't get more than that. So Donald Trump is term limited. If he is term limited, the Constitution says he goes away. He can't run again. And he used this phrase, I'll be dictator for a day. And like the bloodbath comment, the media blew that out of proportion when he actually meant is, no, day one, I'm just going to exercise my pen and do all these executive actions to undo all of Joe Biden's actions without Congress. They took that out of context, willfully so, to provoke violence from the left. Right now, the left is constantly terrorizing Americans about the rise of Christian nationalists. And if Donald Trump gets elected, he's going to put all these Christian nationalists in charge. So you're going to have a theocracy, you're going to have Christian nationalism, you're going to have perpetual votes, but only Christians allowed, which is some level of democracy. But you're also going to have an autocracy, and it's going to be totalitarian. They don't really know. All they know is they want to do something to scare people to stop voting for Trump. And what happens if it doesn't work? Because people's grocery bills are too expensive and people's schooling is too dysfunctional in public education because of liberal wokeism. What's going to happen? They never want to hold themselves accountable for violent rhetoric. They never want to hold themselves accountable for violence. The left's theory on Donald Trump's dictatorship is that the Constitution is too weak to withstand him. The military would do nothing. The Congress would do nothing. The governors and the 50 states would do nothing, and the people would do nothing. Only they, the precious, bold few of the left, will stand up and stop Donald Trump. That's their theory. It's all about them. They never acknowledge when they're wrong. They demand that we believe they're right, and they believe that only they are virtuous enough to hold power. Their rhetoric is violent and dangerous, and increasingly so. The commentary on MSNBC is increasingly more unhinged. The rhetoric on MSNBC, the dichotomy between dictatorship and democracy, is detached from reality. And it really does express a disdain for the American political system, that they think it is too weak to withstand Donald Trump. And this says a lot more about them than him. The constant fear scenarios of Christian nationalism, which suggest that they don't even understand basic Christianity, let alone people in flyover country outside of urban areas, says a lot more about them than him. The fact that they think Donald Trump could be a dictator. Okay, so you think he can be a dictator, but you also think he's dumb. So which is it? He's smart enough to be a dictator, or he's so dumb he falls into it and he's going to use his power? Oh, no, now it's suddenly the people who are surrounding Donald Trump. They're the ones. It's always somebody else. They give no Donald Trump agency in the process. Their theories are muddied, convoluted, shrill, vulgar, and filled with invective, because at the end of the day, it's that the left does not trust you to get it right. The left does not trust the American people. It's why they wish to hand the country over to technocrats to control every aspect of your life, because they don't trust you. They hate him. They don't trust you. And that is a recipe for detachment, distrust, and violence, frankly. They continually and perpetually lecture us about violence from the right, the hate from the right, the shrillness of the right, the dangerous rise of the new right, and Donald Trump and his call to violence and his supporters take him literally, and he's going to act out again. I must repeat it again. The last 2 mass assassination attempts in this country have come from MSNBC viewers, not Newsmax or Fox News viewers. The last 2 mass assassination attempts of politicians and political people in this country came from MSNBC viewers driven to madness by left-wing rhetoric. And here they go again with their fears of dictatorship and the death of democracy. And Donald Trump is an authoritarian tyrant in Vladimir Putin's pocket. It's irresponsible, shrill rhetoric designed to get Donald Trump shot. And a lot of them, I think, privately probably hope that that will happen. And you all should be vigilant and stand against it and turn to the better angels of yourselves. And also tune out the hate-filled, insane rhetoric from people like those on MSNBC. Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, Ricky, you're going to be up first. Welcome.
Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Best day of my life. You know, I was just telling him, you know, this thing, the dictator, there will not be a dictator in this country. In order to be a dictator, you got to control the military. That will not happen in this country. And I mean, and these folks just take this stuff and they carry it on. Even there was a quote yesterday that CNBC, but Fox reported it, where some guy in China was talking about the bloodbath in the automobile industry. Use those terms. Mm-hmm. And this democracy, and nobody can tell you, how is Donald Trump bad for democracy? We know he went overboard on this. I won the election thing, but where is democracy? Well, how is he dangerous for democracy when these people want to take folks off the ballot?
Yep. Look, Ricky, amen. Look, I appreciate the phone call. They are projecting because you and I both know they themselves would love to ensure that they can never lose an election again. It's why they're desperate to get 15 and 16-year-olds the right to vote, and why they want non-American citizens the right to vote, and why they want felons the right to vote, and why they want to keep an open border and flood illegal immigrants into this country to benefit themselves on the census for the Electoral College. They themselves are projecting. The fact of the matter, however, is that in this country, with the genius of our founders, who they all hate, it is very difficult to set up something like a dictatorship, and because so many aspects of our system play against each other. And also, there's no permanence in American politics. You know what's happening with immigrant voters, all the Hispanic voters? The Democrats wanted to open the borders and get here. They're turning Republican. They're turning Trump voters. You know, Donald Trump only needs a 0.7% shift in the Hispanic vote in this country to put Wisconsin and Michigan in play for him and lock it in for him. There's no permanence in American politics, and there's not going to be a dictatorship. Calm down, particularly if you watch MSNBC. Now, also calm down if you're a small business and you need to ship packages like me. Did this yesterday. I went to Stamps.com and was able to print out a label on my printer, stick it to a package, and ship it. And I was able to take the cheapest rate instead of the fastest rate, and it was all visually understandable, and I got up to 89% off UPS and post office rates. And even, this is the pièce de résistance, I got them to pick up the package at my office, so I never, ever stood in line. That's what you can do with Stamps.com. If you go right now, click on the microphone, put in my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K, and you too can take advantage of it, and you get a great deal. You get some free postage, you get a free digital scale to weigh your packages, put in the right weight, and then you can get UPS or the post office to pick it up at your office, and you save up to 89% off. You find the cheapest and the fastest options, and you get shipping, you get saving. You can even buy your supplies for shipping from Stamps.com. So go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone, put in my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K, start shipping, start saving today with Stamps.com. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Some breaking news. Judge McAfee in Atlanta has ordered that Donald Trump and other defendants can appeal his ruling in the Fani Willis matter as to whether or not she should be taken down. That just drags the trial out. Again, the Democrats were convinced that Trump's legal issues would take him out of the race. Not only have they driven up his popularity, they've done nothing to take him out of the race. Phone number here, 877-973-7425. Remember, if you text ENGAGE to 33777, you can get tickets to the gathering in August in Atlanta, the 8th through the 11th. Looking forward to having some great members of Congress there, some governors, some candidates from around the country. Should be a fantastic time. Now, we need to talk about Afghanistan. What I find very funny about the coverage of Afghanistan, y'all know how the media does the pounce stuff. If you read a mainstream media publication, you will inevitably find stories that say Republicans pounce. They pounce on something. or they seize on something, more often than not, it's pounce. It's become a joke, a discrediting joke for the media, how their coverage is not the issue at hand, but how Republicans have pounced on the issue. Well, Politico has found the new one. There were hearings yesterday about Afghanistan, and the Politico headline, Republicans fixate on messy Afghanistan withdrawal. What you should know about the supposed messy Afghanistan withdrawal and the Republican fixation on it is that Democrats in charge of Congress refused to investigate, ask questions, and make inquiries. 13 American soldiers dead, and Congress never even wanted to ask questions of the White House about it. So Republicans in the House of Representatives did. And we learned a lot. We learned they claimed that there was really nothing to be done. It was always going to be chaotic, except we know from the intelligence community, from the CIA in particular, that they warned the Biden White House that the Afghan government would collapse immediately. The Taliban would sweep in and take over. General Milley, now retired, testified and said we should not have left the American embassy outside the security perimeter we had established, which we did. But then there was also General McKenzie, who was responsible ultimately for the withdrawal, who said this.
These kinds of attacks. We did not rely on the Taliban for our security. We used them as one tool among many to beef up our defensive posture. We avoided a number of potential Abbey Gate attacks, and I'm proud of the commanders and troops who prevented them. This is small comfort to those who lost loved ones, and I realize this. Nonetheless, what's remarkable about Kabul is not that the tragedy of Abbey Gate happened, but that many other attacks did not happen. I'll end my statement with this observation. I was the overall commander, and I alone bear full military responsibility for what happened at Abbey Gate.
Now that's Kenneth McKenzie. He was the in charge of U.S. Central Command that oversaw the withdrawal. He's retired. He was in a suit, as was Mark Milley, who had been the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, also in a suit. They're both retired, taking responsibility. Here's the notable thing about Afghanistan everyone forgets. That was the moment Joe Biden's polling collapsed. His polling probably would have collapsed all along, but it was Afghanistan where Joe Biden's polling collapsed, and the polling collapsed in large part because people who had thought he was empathetic realized it was for show. People who thought Joe Biden really cared realized he didn't care. To this day, Joe Biden has never even said the names of the 13 Americans who were killed. He has a pattern of never wanting to say their names. 13 Americans lost their lives. But not only did 13 Americans lose their lives, a lot of Americans were left behind. Hundreds of Americans were left behind in Afghanistan. And what's so notable, for all this spin about Republicans are fixating on the messy Afghanistan withdrawal, the Democrats never cared to ask the tough questions. The Democrats never cared. The Democrats could have held hearings. They chose not to hold those hearings. The Democrats were absolutely incurious. Now, if Donald Trump were in charge and the same thing happened, Democrats would have held hearings. It's cover your butt. The Democrats or the Republicans do the same thing when Republican presidents are in charge. That's why, if you will recall, after the blowout for the Democrats in 2006, they win the House of Representatives. George W. Bush immediately fires Don Rumsfeld so that Rumsfeld doesn't have to go to Congress every day and be grilled. He recognized the Afghan and Iraq situation was negative. Rumsfeld was made the scapegoat, thrown under the bus, gotten rid of, but also Rumsfeld by then kind of wanted to go anyway because he didn't want to have to be hauled up to Congress every day for a dog and pony show by the Democrats who wanted to ask tough questions that Republicans never did. This is what's happening here. Joe Biden got 13 Americans killed because they bungled it. And God bless General McKenzie coming out saying he was ultimately responsible for it. But the intelligence services and the military all warned Joe Biden what was likely to happen. And they told Joe Biden not to do it then. This is the thing that everyone wants to forget about this. Even now in Ukraine, there's a fighting season. Historically, in ancient times, the fighting season was the late spring and the summer into the early fall. Over the wintertime, there's snow. And then in the early spring, you plant the crops. And all sides kind of understood this. You went through the winter, you planted your crops, and then you went off to war. And then the wars began to wrap up in the August season. And then they would go home and they would plow the fields and get the crops and bunker down for the wintertime. And both sides did it. There was a seasonality to war on all sides. To this day, Afghanistan has a fighting season. And the fighting season is the late spring and into the summer for the same thing. They got to go through the winter. It gets cold there. It snows. The mountain passes become inaccessible. There's a planting season and there's a harvest season, and you fight around that time. And Joe Biden, deciding to withdraw when he did, his military advisors told him, you shouldn't do it now because it's fighting season. You should wait. And the military and the intelligence community told Joe Biden, you shouldn't do it now because the Afghan government will immediately collapse. The Taliban will take over. You shouldn't do it now. And Joe Biden decided he knew best. So Joe Biden decided to withdraw in the peak of fighting season when the Taliban were fully able to engage. He decided not to put the American embassy within the security perimeter, and he decided to get out as quickly as possible. And remember, we left weapons behind. And one of the things we've seen is that, you know where those weapons we left behind have wound up? With Hamas, killing Jews. It's true. It's absolutely true. It's well documented that the Hamas, some of the weapons they've been using against Israel are our weapons that the Taliban gave them. Notice how little media coverage that gets, by the way. Joe Biden screwed up. And he's doubled down constantly that it was a flawless withdrawal. So now contrast that with General McKenzie, who says he made the call and it was a problem. Now he says, putting the best spin possible on it, that what's actually remarkable is how many more situations like what happened at that gate could have happened that didn't happen. How many more could have happened? And it's true, a lot more could have and they didn't. But there's still 13 Americans dead. There were people falling from planes out of the sky trying to get out of Afghanistan. We left behind our allies to be slaughtered. We left behind American citizens. We left behind weaponry, machines of war that were turned against us and against our allies. That's how badly Joe Biden bungled this, because he was desperate to get out. You know, and the Democrats' spin is that, well, Donald Trump wanted to get out too. Yes, and he didn't. Yes, Donald Trump wanted to withdraw, but he was listening to the military on their timeline, and he didn't withdraw, and was smart enough to know when we should withdraw was not the middle of fighting season. Bob Gates, who was the defense secretary for George W. Bush after Rumsfeld stayed on to be Barack Obama's Secretary of Defense, said Joe Biden's been wrong about everything in 50 years. Barack Obama said never underestimate Joe's ability to F things up. He did in Afghanistan, and that was when his polling shifted. Americans now saw him as not competent and rather callous, not empathetic, but rather vain. And his polling's been downhill ever since. It's deserved. It is earned punishment from the voters. Joe Biden promised a return to normalcy. Instead, we retreated from Afghanistan and put the Taliban back in charge. Joe Biden promised a return to normalcy. We've now got ships that won't sail through the Red Sea because the Houthi will attack them, and we're not doing anything. Joe Biden promised a return to normalcy, and Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. Joe Biden promised a return to normalcy. We got inflation and high grocery prices. Joe Biden promised a return to normalcy. We got a war between Hamas and Israel, and now Joe Biden, in his return to normalcy, is selling out Israel to placate progressive anti-Semitic activists. We were promised a return to normalcy. We've got Chinese and Russian hackers spreading out throughout this nation. Joe Biden promised a return to normalcy, and we've got Hezbollah terrorists caught at our southern border, and God knows how many have come across the border already. Joe Biden promised a return to normalcy, and instead we got the chaos he said we would get with Donald Trump. Is it any wonder that Donald Trump's polling has gone up? And the most damning thing for Joe Biden are the number of people who now look favorably on the Trump tenure in office when they didn't while he was there. Tells you everything you need to know. A lot of people who don't like Donald Trump may not like either of them, but at least Donald Trump gave them more semblance of normalcy in his policy outcomes than Joe Biden promising normalcy and giving us global war, chaos, and inflation. Tells you everything you need to know about where the election's headed, by the way. Now, I got to move on from here. 877-973-7425 is the phone number. If you want to be on the program, before we do anything else, I got to tell you about Hillsdale College, because Hillsdale wants you to be on their team. Hillsdale College will give you a free course from Victor Davis Hanson so you get familiar with their body of work and with the brilliant award-winning historian Victor Davis Hanson and his lectures on the decline of citizenship in the United States. Now, listen, this isn't going to last much longer, this offer. And you need to go sign up now. It's Victor Davis Hanson, y'all. If you don't know who Victor Davis Hanson is, he's one of my favorite historians. He's fantastic. And he gives this brilliant series of lectures you can take at your own pace, in your own place, on citizenship, its decline, how to revitalize it, the historic significance of citizenship, something that's under assault from the left right now in this country. Hillsdale College wants to educate you on it. And then you begin your relationship with Hillsdale. They offer so many great free classes to you. You go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com today. ericforhillsdale.com. Sign up today. Begin your relationship with Hillsdale College. You will find it, I think, really rewarding. I have learned so much from taking the classes at Hillsdale over the years. And again, do it at your own pace, at your own place. ericforhillsdale.com. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan nationwide. If your business is growing, you see opportunities, and your lenders giving you the runaround, First Liberty might be able to help you. Reach out to them, firstlibertyga.com. If you need $250,000 or more, firstlibertyga.com. Tell them I sent you. Y'all, you know, I mentioned the Ohoopee Match Club yesterday. I had heard about it before, forgot about it, remembered it existed. I think I found a way to go play it. I'm very excited later this year. Now, I want to play some video for you. This is a director. I forget her name now, but there's a new Star Wars series coming out. This new Star Wars series is called Acolyte, and it follows the Jedi 100 years before the events of the Star Wars prequels. Listen to this director talk.
When I saw Frozen, I cried through the entire movie. There was just something about the relationship between the sisters, the like de-villainization of the classic kind of fairy tale bad guy, you know, the concept of true love being between two sisters and not a heterosexual relationship. Like it just destroyed me completely. And I thought, gosh, you know, I would love to make something like this that is, you know, for lack of a better term, Disney, meaning it's something that like my parents would have allowed me to see when I was younger as a queer person.
Gotcha.
But I would have been able to understand as a queer person. And I think I would have had a completely different life.
You know, Bob Iger has already expressed his concerns about the way Disney stories are being told. So we have a self-described queer director who wanted to make something that she as a queer person could understand through Star Wars. The first trailer is not promising, although it looks like to be one of the bad guys who's prattling on with the Marxist theories, but you already heard she wants to de-villainize the villains, make it more complex. Can't have good, can't have evil, can't have right, can't have wrong. It's all a muddied mess. Designed so that a queer director can relate through her queerness to her work. There's nothing wrong with a gay person, or in her case, she used the word queer, wanting to make art that reflects that. There's nothing wrong with it per se. But is it really going to sell well to the mass of people who want Star Wars? You're dragging your lifestyle choices into something. And their response is, well, it's been made by heterosexuals. No, not really. It's the overwhelming majority of people's worldview, whether you believe you're a part of it or not, that is reflected in the work. And now you're going to conform a narrow aspect of it. I'm not expecting this to do well. Looks like they poured a lot of money into it. And it has nothing to do with homophobia or transphobia or any of the phobias. It has to do with someone taking a very narrow worldview, designed for what she would say is her community of people, and trying to translate it more broadly into the realm of everyone else. I don't think stuff like that works. It's the same thing as if you take a conservative who decides to do a very explicitly conservative, like one of those Jesus movies you see all the time that don't play well, except they don't get the budget that Disney would give this woman, but those fall flat, and I suspect this will fall flat, and you know what's going to happen when it falls flat. It's easily predictable. They're going to blame homophobia. They're going to blame bigotry. They're going to blame people for not wanting to embrace the queer vision of Star Wars, that it's all your fault, not their fault. And, you know, Bob Iger, I don't know him. I know people who know him. I get the sense he knows that there's a problem, and he's slowly trying to change things. And he may be running out of time, although George Lucas just came out and said he's going to stand with Bob Iger in some shareholder fights about his leadership. But, you know, Iger has been pretty straightforward in saying Disney needs to focus more on the masses and storytelling for the masses and not these little niche projects, or niche, as they would say, projects. I would say so. When you have someone who says we want to de-villainize the villains and make something relatable to her queer self, that to me sounds like that's not something that's going to be able to sell to the masses. And then the masses are going to get blamed for not embracing it, setting the masses up to fail when they reject someone's personal work of art. Disney needs help. It needs a correction. Maybe it needs an enema. I don't know. When we come back, we got to shift gears to how Joe Biden is screwing up the macro economy, not just the micro economy.